Last chapter that we cover in this course is chapter 9, which is the cost of capital. And we have already jumped ahead and discussed chapters 10 and 11, which are capital budgeting chapters. And we've done that without first defining the assumed interest rate that's used in those accept and reject decisions. So the cost of capital is really just the cost of financing from long-term sources, which would be from debt and equity, so bonds and stock. Now, a few other synonyms that we've used in the past, such as discount rate and required rate of return, it's okay, it still means the same thing, but from a company's perspective, the most common term used to refer to that overall interest rate is the cost of capital. And there is a cost for each source of capital, both debt and equity, such as the rate of interest paid on bonds or dividends that are paid on stock. Companies, of course, use both to finance their long-term capital needs, but instead of looking at each of these in isolation, they use what's called the weighted average cost of capital. And the weighted average cost of capital is the blended overall rate, which is weighted by the amount of debt versus equity that the company uses. So let's consider an example. So let's think about a company that has a capital structure that has proportions of debt and preferred stock and common stock. So let's say that their capital structure has debt that makes up about 52% of their capital structure. And let's say that they have preferred stock, PS for preferred stock, that makes up 11% of their capital structure. And then we have CS, common stock, which would make up the remaining 37% of their capital structure. And calculating these individually, which we will do in a later video, we'll have, let's say, individual costs that we know to issue each one of these sources break down into debt being a cost of 6.8%. So cost of debt is 6.8%. Cost of preferred stock, let's say that is about 8.1%. And finally, as we would expect, the cost of common stock being the most risky capital source, that's going to almost always have the largest individual cost. And let's say in this case it is 11.4%. So cost of common stock is 11.4%. So what we want to do in order to determine what our weighted average cost of capital is just some fairly simple algebra. So we're going to take the individual costs and then multiply them by their weights. So 6.8% is our cost of debt. That makes up 52%, so 0.52 of our capital structure. We're going to add to that the weight of the preferred stock, so that is cost of preferred 8.1%, and multiply that times 0.11, 11% is the capital structure. And then we're going to add to that, finally, the 11.4% of common, and weight that by the 37% or 0.37 capital structure. And when we do the math, we come up in the end with a final weighted average cost of capital of 8.65%. So this weighted average cost of capital is the cost of capital that the company will use in those capital budgeting decisions, which are those accept and reject decisions that are used when determining which projects to take on for the company.